What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Yes, we are. And this is the origin of Lord Drakkon, who's probably one of the coolest characters ever created in the history of the Power Rangers mythos. So, if you guys recall the last video that we did, basically the Dragon Zord, or the Zord itself of Lord Drakkon, had more or less been defeated, but Tommy and Billy were kind of caught inside of it, and then ultimately teleported away to this alternate reality where Lord Drakkon had came into power. And so, what we end up getting here is a really, really cool origin. Now, before we jump into it, instead, as Billy and Tommy are sort of roaming around here and trying to figure out what's going on, they actually end up in this kind of museum that talks about how Rita Repulsa had come to power, how Rita Repulsa and really Lord Drakkon sort of run everything, but it really seems to be more Rita than anything else. It's pretty ambiguous for them because they don't really understand exactly what's going on, right? It's like, I mean, this place is in shambles. Like, how did it get to this point? Right? Angel Grove is quite literally just ripped to pieces. But in the middle of trying to figure it all out, suddenly they're met by the arrival of what is basically a cop who looks like the Black Ranger. And that's kind of the crazy thing, because from there, like, it's like they recognize this Tommy has the flute for the Dragon Zord, right? And it's kind of like, okay, this guy's got a dragon dagger, like, what in the world is going on here, right? They immediately pursue these guys. And so the idea of Billy is, okay, let's go to Angel Grove High School, right? Like, you know, it's a familiar place. At the very least, we can hide out. We can just kind of give ourselves a momentary reprieve. Obviously, they're not going to stay there forever. The problem is, as soon as they get there, the entire place has basically been turned into a correctional facility that really seems to be ran by Finster, right? And so it's just kind of like, wow, you know. And then of course all those ranger cops more or less show up, and this leads Billy and Tommy and gives them a chance to basically escape, right? Jumping in the water and then just kind of getting as far away as they possibly can. And so while Lord Drakkon is notified by these cops, essentially, Billy and Tommy end up making their way to the command center that was the Power Rangers. And when they get there, the whole place is wrecked. I mean, it's decimated, right? Like, Zords are all over the place. The funny thing is, some of the Zords are the ones that haven't even shown up yet in the Power Rangers comics. Technically, they've shown up in the actual show in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and we'll explain them here in a second. And so it's kind of a crazy thing here, because once Billy gets up there, and really once Tommy gets up there, and they're kind of asking, they're kind of looking around, they're like, God, man, this must have been some kind of a crazy question. This disembodied voice seemingly comes out of nowhere and says, yeah, it was a vicious battle indeed, right? It's crazy. And when they both realize this is a voice they've heard, the voice kind of directs them down into the basement of the command center. Now, this is an amazing moment, right? It's one of the coolest things. Those of you guys who are long-standing Power Rangers fans are gonna absolutely love this, right? So as they're talking to it, it's a little bit suspicious because they don't really know exactly who the voice is coming from, but it is coming from someone, right? Somewhere. And so Tommy, who's obviously and really always has been a little more brave, sometimes foolish, and certainly more reckless than somebody like Billy, who's more calculating, just kind of dives down there and is like, this guy knows who we are, right? So at the very least, if he means to attack us, there's not much we can do to stop him. So at the very least, we can go kind of figure out what's going on here. And so once they get down there and Tommy's just kind of like, okay, like, how do I get to you? We end up finding out he's basically in the basement of the command center, and there's this sealed door. And this guy kind of promises, you know, to essentially tell Tommy everything he wants to know, right? To answer all his questions. And so he ultimately ends up prying the door open, only to find out it's Saba, right? Or Saba, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I always call him Saba, basically the sword of the White Ranger, right? And that's the craziest thing, because it's like, damn, dude, the sword of the White Ranger's here. As soon as I saw that, I was like, what? Now, of course, around the same time this happens, everything pops off, right? You basically, like, you got Lord Drakkon who shows up here with you know, a whole host of forces and so on, and kind of starts intimidating Billy and Tommy. Now, here's the thing. Drakkon looks amazing, and I've always loved the way he looks, right? I've always loved the design of his character. He looked awesome. And it's kind of a crazy thing, because where he kind of talks to Tommy and even sort of makes fun of him a little bit and kind of gives him a hard time, the statement Tommy makes is like, we're not going to lay down here, right? You don't know, you have no idea who you're dealing with here. And he's like, actually, I do, Tommy. You're nothing more than my lesser self, right? And that's when it's basically kind of revealed that Lord Drakkon is actually Tommy from an alternate reality, right? Like an alternate universe. And that's crazy, right? That was nuts when that first came out, because it was like, damn, what happened that Tommy basically conquered the world? Like, what in the heck happened here? Now, because of the fact that I guess you could call him main Tommy, right? Good Tommy, essentially. But what we'll do here is we'll call good Tommy, Tommy. And we'll call the evil Tommy Lord Drakkon, since that's really his proper name anyway, right? So Tommy is just kind of like, okay, look, so this is kind of crazy, right? Like, you're not me. And Drakkon's like, yeah, you're right, man. I'm not you. I'm a better you. And so initially they intend to take them, but Saba kind of comes to the rescue and actually summons the White Tiger Zord. Right now, there's not a whole lot this Zord can do. As you guys can tell, this thing is absolutely crushed, but it's designed to be a distraction more so than anything else. And when that goes down and the White Tiger is literally just kind of rampaging, Drakkon's telling his guys, fire up the cannons, tear this thing apart, that what you end up getting is Saba, who basically leads Tommy and Billy to the Falcon Zord, which isn't necessarily completely defunct. It's got enough energy to where it can get them out of there, but it's not quite its former self, right? Doesn't really possess the same level of power as it used to, but it does allow Billy and Tommy to ultimately escape and get away. Now, once they get to a bit of a resting place, there's a couple things that go on here. The first is Saba basically tells them this Zord is not fully powered, right? It's been dormant for a long time. It needs some geothermal energy to basically get itself going again, right? To get its power back up to where it's supposed to be, but at the very least, we're in a relatively safe place. We also end up learning they're in the woods of the Coinless, basically individuals who are part of what's in effect a resistance force that are trying to fight against Lord Drakkon, which is an awesome concept. But he also basically spills the beans on how Lord Drakkon became Lord Drakkon in the first place. And this is amazing. I'm gonna tell you guys right now, it's one of the most exciting things, right? I love origin stories for alternate reality versions of characters who were twisted and evil. And as a guy who's been reading comics for decades, I gotta say, this is one of the best written origin stories that I think I've ever seen. The way that Saba explains this is that all of this started with the arrival of the Green Ranger, right? With the arrival of Tommy. Now, much like in the main universe for Power Rangers, that when Tommy first showed up on the scene, he had basically been hoodwinked by Rita Repulsa, right? Operating under her control, fighting against the Power Rangers. Just like what we saw before, he beat the crap out of the Power Rangers because all the Power Rangers suck in comparison to the power of the Green Ranger. And so he overcame seemingly all of them. The big difference here is that in the main Power Rangers universe, when Tommy was defeated and the Power Rangers really approached him with friendship as opposed to hostility, that this led to the Green Ranger essentially, being freed from Rita Repulsa's mind control and then ultimately joining the Power Rangers because they offered him that olive branch. The same process happened here. The difference is that Tommy stood against them. He said, no, I don't want to join you guys. I don't want to have anything to do with you guys. And so what he ended up doing was actually going back with Rita Repulsa. And one of the big differences here, the way this is kind of explained, is that where Zordon was always stressing this idea that defense and unification was necessary to protect the world, not only from any threats that may exist out there, but protect the world from destroying itself, that Rita, on the other hand, was still largely being manipulative and had pitched this idea and explained this idea to Tommy that the only way to save the world was to basically destroy the world and to remake it. If humanity was going to get it together, it already would have. The fact that it hasn't shows that it doesn't want to. And so if the world's not gonna fix itself, then somebody will fix the world for them, right? And that's what Rita Repulsa did. That when she showed up on the scene with like Goldar and with the Green Ranger Tommy and with all the putties and everything, that over the course of years, they literally just conquer the huge sections of the world. Now, the question you're probably asking yourself is, what were the Power Rangers doing during this time? And one of the things to understand is that at this point in time, the Power Rangers were largely still a relatively small faction. And so when you're facing off against like this mountain of putties and you're facing off against the Green Ranger and Goldar, what it really seemed to turn into with the Power Rangers was guerrilla warfare tactics, pot shots. That's all it really seemed to be, right? Just showing up here, showing up there, trying to defend where they could, when they could, but there wasn't really a whole lot they could do against such an overwhelming force. And so the way it's explained is that cities burned, leaders gave in, and it says apologists made excuses, right? That apologists were like, well, I mean, she's not gonna rule us forever, guys. I mean, we can kind of give in a little bit, I mean, it's okay. People who were basically, who just didn't really have a backbone. What you actually found is by virtue of the message that Rita Repulsa was putting out, one, between her own propaganda, and two, the people she was conquering and temporarily and kind of, in a manipulative fashion, improving their lives, you actually began to see people who embraced the rule of Rita Repulsa. And that's one of the most important things here. It's not enough for a person to kind of step in and conquer things. What you need is to get people to your side. What you have to do is sway the people to your cause, conquer everything, and then shift things up. And then put them in a position to where even if they could fight back, there's no real way for them to fight back or no real meaningful way for them to fight back, right? That's how you conquer a country. That's how you take over an entire territory. And so in response to this, what you had was essentially a last-ditch effort in what became known as the fall of the Rangers. And this was a combination of all these different things coming together. The big kicker to all this is that unlike in the normal Mighty Morphin Power Rangers timeline, where the White Ranger was created as kind of the next evolution of what Power Rangers were, harnessing the white light, things like that. In this instance, it was an act of desperation. It was the idea of, okay, we're gonna harness everything that's good in the world and we're going to basically channel it directly into a Ranger and make this person the most powerful of all the Rangers that have seemingly ever ever existed on Earth. There are a couple things to kind of keep in mind here. For example, you do have the alien Power Rangers. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar, that was actually a story arc that took place in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers TV show when the main Power Rangers themselves were de-aged by the father of Rita Repulsa, and then in turn, Zordon had to grab alien Rangers and bring them in kind of temporarily until the Power Rangers were aged back up, and then they went back to doing their thing again. But this whole idea, right, Ninjor, the guy who basically helped the Power Rangers become ninjas because the movie sucked and nobody wants that to be in continuity, all these allies had basically band together in what was, by all standards of measurement, the last battle at the Alamo, right? That's really what it was, the final stand. Like, if we fall here, everything falls. There's no possible way that we can defend beyond this. All the Zords, the whole 9 yards, right? It's all brought in, right? This is 2 seconds left in the game. It's 4th and 30 because they're terrible. They're at like the 70-yard line, right, on the opposition side. Like, at this point, it's a Hail Mary pass, right? That's exactly what this is. It's all right, every receiver just run forward that way, and we're just gonna lob this ball as hard as we can and pray to God we get a touchdown. And they don't, right? As soon as like this whole thing is crazy, right? The Green Ranger, Goldar, Scorpina, the whole 9 yards, like they're all here and just descend on this on the command center, and it's like a battle for the ages, right? I mean, it's crazy. Like, all these different versions of the Power Rangers are all fighting against these guys as best as they possibly can. The only person who's the holdout here is Jason, because Jason was chosen as the guy to become the White Ranger. And so while they're basically trying to power him up and essentially get him to a point where the morphing process is possible, right, where he can actually morph in and out of the White Ranger, in that moment, Tommy breaks into the command center, and so the entire process is interrupted. What it ultimately comes down to is a fight between Jason and Tommy, essentially for the future of the world, right? If we're being honest with ourselves, it's not just a fight between these two guys, it's a fight to save the world. That's really all it is. And literally, Tommy tells Jason, like, this is your last shot, man. Like, either you can ally with the side of Rita Repulsa, or you can die. And of course, Jason's like, no, right? I'm never going to ally with Rita. And he's like, okay, fine. Then about that new power. And ultimately, Tommy gets the upper hand on Jason, seemingly kills him when he comes out of the command center with Jason's helmet, and like, that's it, right? He's basically merged himself with the power of the White Ranger, and that's how Lord Drakkon became Lord Drakkon, when he's a merger between the Green and the White Ranger. And that's the crazy thing, is because at that point, Saba just kind of finishes the story and says, that was the beginning of the end. And the big question they have here is, then why weren't you captured? How do you fit into all of this? And the answer is that if Lord Drakkon were to ever get his hands on Saba, that it would seemingly just kind of solidify his role. Because as of right now, he's more or less just kind of a blend between the White and the Green Ranger, but without Saba, he can't really become a 100% White Ranger, right? He can't become a complete White Ranger. But as soon as he has that sword, his transformation will be complete, right? That's basically what'll end up happening with him. And that's why Zordon, as this kind of last-ditch movement, basically, kept Saba hidden down in the basement of the command center and shut off anybody's ability to access him or anybody's ability to know that he's there. And so he could only basically be woken up by a person who was pure, right? He was kind of kept in hibernation in that way. That was the fail-safe and the backup plan. And so when Tommy and Billy showed up here, that he could only really be wielded by a pure person, only be woken up by a pure person, which appears to be Tommy. The biggest problem is, before they can really get any definitive information out of this beyond that, suddenly they're ensnared by this power, only to be met by a handful of different people. And who they are, I'm not telling you, but I'm gonna tell you right now, it's amazing. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.